A tentative recovery in 2020-21 and increasingly gloomy developments in 2022. That broadly sums up the IMF's view and outlook on global growth and the global economy. The IMF has cut its global growth forecast while upping the inflation estimates for the world. Joining me now to talk about where we are headed in 2022 and more importantly next year, and where India figures in the scheme of things, is the Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva. Thanks very much for joining us here on the Global Dialogue. It's a pleasure to have you back here on the program and back in India as well.
It is my great pleasure and honor to be on the program again.
You know, let me start by talking to you about your visit here to India. You've spent the last 3 days here. You've met the Finance Minister, you've met the Prime Minister, and you will soon be meeting with the new President as well. I want to understand from you what your big takeaway is from the conversations that you've had here in India.
First of all, that India, on this dark horizon you described, is a bright spot. And it is not by coincidence. It is the outcome of reforms India has undertaken, especially in the field of digitalization. And second, that India is truly poised for its big moment on international stage. As it takes over the G20 presidency, it has a lot to offer from its own experience, and it is going to be leading in a particularly challenging time, on the ground of its credibility as a country that has been serious about reforms and serious about leapfrogging in the 21st century.
Well, you said that this is going to be India's big moment as it takes on the G20 presidency next year. You talked about the digitization benefits as well. But I want to understand from you the role that India can play as it takes on the G20 presidency. For instance, in your conversations with the Finance Minister, I understand that she urged the IMF to take a proactive role as far as global regulations on cryptocurrency is concerned. So what do you believe can be the role that India in coordination with the IMF can play on some of these crucial issues?
I see 3 areas where we can work very productively together. We can support the Indian presidency. First, with strengthening the multilateral system. It is now being challenged. There are forces of fragmentation, and they're going to be damaging for emerging markets and developing economies. Let's remember that the emerging world quadrupled its economy in the last 3 decades, and 1.3 billion people have been lifted out of poverty, largely because of international cooperation. So there is a lot at stake, and India will be speaking on behalf of emerging markets and developing countries. We will be supporting that wholeheartedly. Secondly, the world is changing very rapidly, especially in the area of digital. It was put on steroids by the pandemic, and in the world of money, both CBDCs and crypto stablecoins have emerged very strongly, but they're not regulated. So India is right to call on the IMF to make sure that crypto is not the new wild, wild west. And we are very aligned in how we think about the necessity of regulation to, one, differentiate across different asset classes, from those that are not backed, like Bitcoin, to stable coins that are backed, but they bring a different risk of, say, dollarization if US stablecoin is the one to dominate. So we have to work together to advance regulation for the benefit to take advantage of what crypto can deliver, fast and cheap payments, but also manage the risks to cybersecurity, and especially how money gets on the darker side of the world. And third, we see huge advantage of working in sync with India at the time when debt sustainability is becoming a growing concern. There is the G20 Common Framework for Debt Resolution. It is very important to have a rule book that makes access to it and using it clear. possibly expand it so countries like Sri Lanka can find a home in the common framework. And India, being a new donor, a new lender, can play a very important role in advancing that work. And of course, we have many other issues like climate, where I expect the G20 to find space for everybody to see eye to eye on these global challenges.
You know, you've spoken about several of the opportunities and several of the global challenges as well. Let me address each one of those. But before I move away from cryptocurrencies, just a quick word on how soon you believe we will or we could possibly see a global regulation or a global architecture being put in place, given the fact that this is, you know, so many different jurisdictions we're talking about.
We already have a roadmap that the FSB has been pursuing with streams of work. What we are expected to do, and the finance minister was very clear about it, is to bring the voices of all our 190 members in this conversation and make sure that regulation is done with an eye to the interests of different groups of countries. In fact, the Prime Minister expanded the request by saying, well, it would be very good if the fund looks more broadly in India's experience with digitalization for inclusion, for improving fiscal performance, collect more taxes, improve the quality of spending, for how India dealt with the pandemic. So we intend to dedicate a team to work specifically on the issue of crypto, bring the two other key agencies, BIS and FSB, so together we can have a more pragmatic, with clear deliverables, roadmap towards more regulated space. And of course, it is fantastic for India to use its presidency to excite other developing countries to take this road of digitalization for more transparency, for more trust of the citizen, and also to do what India is doing, allow people to own their data and use their data for their benefit.
You know, let me talk to you now about the global challenges that we're faced with. And as I pointed out, the IMF in its latest outlook has cut lower the global growth forecast for 2022 as well as for 2023. You know, you have said that those estimates have a downside risk associated with them, and a lot of the risks that you spoke of have already materialized. So are we now staring at a recession, at least in large parts of the world? How real is that as of today?
What I can tell you is that inflation has proven to be much more stubborn than we thought it would be. Why? Because of the triple crisis: pandemic, war, and then cost of living crisis that fuels inflation from its end, you know, by people demanding more compensation. So we are in a place where it is paramount for central banks to strive for achieving a place where the stability of the price signals is secured again. What does it mean? It means tightening, higher interest rates, and high interest rates when they're led by the Fed mean more strength for the dollar, depreciation of other currencies. How would that impact growth? Negatively. I can tell you, we got, since we issued our last forecast, we got the second quarter, the world economy shrunk by 2%. India, by the way, is performing well on a quarter by quarter. It is over 13% growth, but even India is now underperforming vis-a-vis original projections. What does it mean for 2023? What it means is that this slowdown will translate into recession in some countries. It is early to say whether it would be widespread recession, but I can tell you, for many countries, even if they are in positive growth territory, it would feel like a recession if we are to just project the factors I described. But let's remember that Mother Nature this year has shown that we have been complacent for far too long. That would mean that harvest for next year may be lower, and pressure on food prices may remain quite strong, fueling this necessity of action on the monetary policy side. Very difficult time for fiscal policy. Why? Because fiscal space has shrunk during and after the pandemic, and the remaining is being pressured because more people are suffering, more businesses are at risk. How to deploy limited fiscal space in a most targeted manner is crucial, so fiscal policy doesn't become the enemy of monetary policy, fueling more inflation and as a result higher interest rates. Very difficult time, and in this very difficult time my biggest concern is that ironically we need coordination more, we need each other more, but there is more fragmentation. It is tougher to bring the world together.
While it is tougher to bring the world together on many of these global challenges that you spoke of, there has been coordinated, synchronized action, at least as part of central banks. Since July of last year, we've seen 75 central banks move in terms of raising rates. The Fed has made its path clear. The ECB hiked rates by 75 basis points. You have urged policymakers to act now, or you believe that the pain will be exacerbated. How much more do you believe we are likely to see rates move higher before, inflation can be less of a challenge than it is today?
We are still hoping that what has happened, and you're absolutely right, there has been synchronized action by central banks, will translate in 2023 in moderating inflation. Too early to say whether by the end of 2023 we can take a breath and say it is in the rear view mirror, but the trajectory is clear. We already see that in the United States. What is more concerning is synchronized fiscal policy, and we are still seeing quite a variety of response from the fiscal side. In some countries, supporting through energy subsidies or controlling energy prices, which is not the best use of public money. It is not targeted. So rich people benefit as well as poor people. That lack of synchronization towards more targeted, more effective fiscal policy is a concern. Why? Because of what I said, that can put fiscal policy and monetary policy in a clash, to be avoided. This is why what we are proposing is, when we come together for the annual meetings in October, to concentrate on shaping up the right fiscal policy response so we can have best deployment of scarce public money at this time. And I can tell you, at the IMF, we are already stepping up for our vulnerable members. We have received a number of requests, including Sri Lanka, a country in your neighborhood. And we are very eager and able to provide support early. And my message to everybody is, if you see trouble down the road, come precautionary so we can help you to prevent a more difficult time, more pain ahead.